Numbers and letters, they really do involve flesh and blood. Well, the problem with letters and numbers, as example, the letters HR and the numbers 2990, is that nothing is revealed that causes the blood to boil, nostrils to flare, senses to sharpen, just numbers and letters. For me, the next such offender is the acronym, in which letters are strung together, such as NEED. But do numbers and letters compel our attention? Well, they can propel us forward as occupiers and activists of all sorts, depending on what the letters and numbers stand for, and if there's something we can actually do something about it. So to help us decipher these numbers today, we have our telephone guest, Stephen Zarlenga, the director of the American Monetary Institute, and someone who helped draft the HR 2990, that's where those letters and numbers come from, the 2990 bill that was introduced into the House of Representatives in 2011 by then Representative Dennis Kucinich. The NEED acronym stands for National Employment Defense Act. So welcome to 15 Minutes of Facts, Stephen.
Thank you, Jerry. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. We, in this world of economics, we need someone sane to talk to, and I'm hoping you might be that person. Now, going back to this bill, the very fact that it died in a House subcommittee last year should give us an idea of its importance. In fact, the bill could be an earthquake to our banking system.
It would be an earthquake to the banking system, but really good for the people right away. It's not complicated. It does change the power structure in the country. And I think all the Occupy people know that that just has to be done now.
Well, you're listening to someone who agrees with you. I have a feeling our listeners will too. So let's get serious about this and tell us what we need to know. Among other things, and very importantly, I understand that a passionate case is going to be made on Sunday, May 12th, from 1 to 5 at Cooper's Union here in New York City. The purpose of which is to engage people in seeing this bill reintroduced. Now, the title of your event is called Fixing Our Money System. So tell us about this gathering, who's going to be speaking, and equally important, why we should be there.
Well, absolutely. Thank you. And what we're trying to do at Cooper Union is get as many concerned New Yorkers in who will hear that there is a real solution to the kind of things that they've been hearing crazy things about. They've been hearing about fiscal cliffs. They've been hearing sequestration. They've been hearing close down our government. Now, all of this is really nonsense. There are things that can be done that have been talked about not only for decades, but for centuries. And we're going to bring these things to everybody's attention. And one of our main purposes, Jerry, we're trying, and you're hopefully a really big help on this. We want to reach Occupy Wall Street people. And this is our way to do it directly. You know, one of the things about Occupy Wall Street, you don't have a kind of organizational structure, which is really good in some ways, because there's nothing anybody can take over, but difficult in other ways to reach people. So this is our way of reaching Green Party people and Occupy Wall Street people, plus others who are interested in monetary reform.
Okay, I've got that. Now, I know your credentials, and our readers can certainly Google you to find more, and we'll include this in our piece that we're going to post for you. But who are some of the other people? I understand there's a Nick Tiedemann, a William Batt. Who are these folks, and why did you gather these people in particular to talk to us?
Both of those fellows are among the absolutely leading Georgists in our country and the world, in fact. And the Henry George School of Social Science in New York is helping us bring people into this meeting, and I wanted to have some people who really understood Georgism, and these are those. Now, Nick Tiedemann is coming up from Virginia Tech, and he's one of the most reasonable economists that I've ever met, and he's going to talk about different forms of monetary reform. William Batt is coming down from Albany. He, again, He is a leading Georgian in the area of reclaiming the commons. And monetary reform is a part of reclaiming our commons.
Well, I can certainly respond to that. And you don't have to be and have occupied Wall Street to find that the restructuring of our monetary system is of keen interest to people. Now, as you remember, and I know you're a fan of Occupy, at the very center of the Occupy's message has been the outrage over a broken financial system.
Should be.
Well, there should be outrage, but there's also a challenge, and
a
lot of people at Occupy are familiar with that. What's been missing is a single coherent message and the answer around which such activists can rally. So is it possible that the case that you're going to be making, which I understand is the creation of money by financial institutions as interest-bearing debt should be ceased once and for all?
Absolutely stop.
So,
that is the cause of 90%, maybe 80% of the world's problems, other than religious causes. Mm-hmm. The fact that all the nations of the world are operating with misstructured monetary systems whereby private banks are creating the money supply. When they make loans, they are making loans. They're creating what we use for money, in essence, whenever they make a loan. That has to be stopped. That's easy to stop. We've known exactly how to stop it since the 1930s, the Great Depression, when the Chicago Plan was put forward out of the University of Chicago before it went over to the dark side with its market worship. Now, that is an essential aspect of monetary reform. You have to stop the banks from creating money. We will put the Federal Reserve System where people think it is now. People think it's in our government. They think the Fed is part of the government. It's not. It should be. So we'll put the Fed into the government, and what political people like to talk about, instead of nationalizing, they prefer the words incorporate the Federal Reserve into the U.S. Treasury. Fine.
Well, okay, I like that idea. Number one, I know, and we all do, how people misuse words to cause them to be sensitive so that we don't hear the truth behind them, we hear the mystical part of them. Yeah. I would be delighted to see an economist proposing monetary reform, and why haven't more of them done that?
Well, that's a good question, and the reason may be to protect their oncoming or ongoing paychecks. But to answer that question, I will let Professor Jamie Galbraith out of Texas, answer that question. When he addressed the crime subcommittee of the U.S. Senate, the United States Senate, he opened his testimony to them with the following statement. He said, "I stand before you as a member of a disgraced profession." Period. That's how he opened his testimony. It's a disgrace what the economists have been doing and have not been doing. By the way, Jamie Galbraith finished that testimony with a paragraph that told the senators that it's a matter of existential importance, whether the United States of America survives or not, that they prosecute any criminal wrongdoing from the collapse. And unfortunately, nothing has happened with the Obama administration. It's been another disgrace.
So once again, it's a case of history repeating itself because for whatever reason, we, the common people out here, are not getting the message very clearly. So part of becoming educated is what we're doing here.
Absolutely.
So that our audience, our audience that we're doing our best to keep from having their eyes glaze over, need to understand these things. So I'm going to ask you one other question. Explain the quasi-independent status of the Federal Reserve System and the need to grant the U.S. Department of Treasury the exclusive authority to originate money.
Well, the answer is really simple, and nobody's eyes are going to glaze over at this Cooper Union thing, I can guarantee that. The answer is that whoever controls the nation's money system over time, controls the nation. That should be pretty self-evident to all the Occupy people anyway. So you must have the creation of money belong to the people through their elected representatives, and that's what Kucinich's act did. It puts the control of money back into the hands of the public through their representatives. Now, if you have money created privately, it's going to be misused. They're certainly going to be favoring the kinds of things that they think their friends like, for example. But
well, speaking of good friends, let me appease any would-be Ron Paul or libertarian enthusiasts who might be listening by asking you this question. Shouldn't we prefer a solution based on free market power rather than government?
Nah. Listen, I love Ron Paul, and I love his people. I've talked to them in New York. They've heard this message and really understand it more than others. And the only difference that we have with Ron Paul, he's a great congressman, but he thinks that the Austrian school has actually done its monetary homework. And I know, because I've actually worked on this for so many years, that they have not done their monetary homework. Now, we always welcome Ron Paul people at these meetings, have had them at smaller meetings before, and we hope they'll come here in New York. We welcome all of the Greens in New York. Anybody who's interested in figuring out what has gone wrong and why isn't anything being done about it. So,
well, you do seem to be a fan of people who are activists. Certainly Occupy qualifies for that. The Green Party qualifies for that. Our friends, the Ron Paul folk, they certainly are active. So why is it that you're particularly pointing a finger towards Occupy and like organizations to help you in this work of yours and the AMI, American Monetary Institute?
It's the natural next step for the Occupy movement. They've got this tremendous form of resist and reject. All of that is outstanding and necessary and appropriate for the kind of nonsense that's being shoved at us. What they need to do to that form is fill it with some real content. And that's what we offer. And, we made this conference a $10 event. They can register in advance at Eventbrite. They go to our website, monetary.org. You go on Eventbrite, and if you register in advance, it's $10 for the whole day. If they come at the door, it's $20. So these are we needed to do that in order to pay for Cooper Union. These are readily accessible events, and we're not going to play word games at these in our sessions. We're going to tell them straight out what's up and what has to be done about it. Now,
let's talk about that. I know you're aware of strike debt, and I know that you may also be aware of rolling jubilee, where for the first time, instead of us bailing out banks, we decided to bail ourselves out. What is your feeling about that? What is your impression?
Well, I've heard that the strike debt group is really good, and I'm looking forward to an opportunity to address them, or at least get them into our conference, and they can hear us there. What is so important is to get the technical details, which are straightforward and simple, and that's what we're going to offer at this meeting. Now, I hope we can reach Occupy people. They're not easy to reach. They're not down there in one place anymore.
No, they're not. Well, let me ask you this.
What was the other part of your question?
Well, the other part really deals with the mechanics and why people should be coming there. For example, this workshop, which I think will be a full afternoon, and the role that you play in it, it would be unfortunate if I didn't ask you about the book that you wrote, which caught the attention of Dennis Kucinich and prompted the creation of the NEED Act. And that's a book that you wrote called The Lost Science of Money. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, sure. It's about an 800-page book, and Hugh Downs wrote an excellent first review of it, which I think you may have there. And it just got its most recent review from Dr. Michael Kumhoff of the International Monetary Fund. He's a research director there, and he's read my book. And his review appears in an IMF working paper, page 13, and he said, "The Lost Science of Money, a masterful work." Now, unquote. The book is about 800 pages, and the first 23 chapters are the historical case studies of money. And then chapter 20, which starts essentially with Aristotle and goes forward. Chapter 24 then says, given what we learn from those case studies, what should we be doing now in America? And that then leads us to what was called the American Monetary Act, which Dennis Kucinich's H.R. 2990 was based upon, and it has just three major parts, but all three are necessary. And those three parts are, first, you put the Federal Reserve into the U.S. Treasury. Second, that's not enough, and we know that's not enough because this was done with the Bank of England, and it was not enough in the 1940s. The second thing you have to do, you must stop the banks from having any power to issue new money.
From your lips to God's ears.
I hope. And those two things are not enough, and we know that from historical case studies of our own. The third thing that must happen is that government must be encouraged to spend new money into circulation, not loan, but spend. And you start with the $2.2 trillion that the engineers tell us we need over the next 5 years in order to fix our infrastructure. Not to make it perfect, just to make it safe. So those are the three elements. Mm-hmm. Now, you did ask me about Jubilee.
Yes.
And there's one thing there that's very important. They used to have Jubilees. Back thousands of years ago, they were pretty well accepted. But they stopped. And we theorize that one of the reasons that they stopped was that instead of the money being mainly owed to the temple structure and the establishment, the what you would call the government, it became owed more and more to people, to other private people. And when it's owed to the government, it's very easy for the government to say, okay, these debts are forgotten and forgiven. When it's owed to other people, it's very difficult for them to do that. Now, part of H.R. 2990 takes all of the loans that have been made by the banking system, which are really loans. They're not technically they're not money, but they're used as money. And on day one it says all that stuff that they loaned becomes real money. But now, when the borrowers pay it back to their banks, the bank must pay it over to the Treasury. So the money ultimately becomes owed to the government, and therefore it's in a position to take action on Jubilees if that becomes popular enough.
Well, Mr. Stephen Zarlenga, we're coming up on that 15-minute and then some wall of ours. So I want you to say that if you're in the example of the speakers that will be there and the type of information that's going to be shared, we can't thank you enough for previewing that for us here on 15 Minutes of Fact on WGRNradio.com. I do encourage those. Hold on for a second. I want to make sure you're going to get one last thing in. But I want to encourage people finding themselves in New York City on Sunday, May 12th, to attend Fixing Our Broken Money System in the afternoon at Cooper Union. So the idea is to achieve justice, avoid austerity, reduce debt, and create jobs. Can you think of any better reason to be there? Now, tickets, as you pointed out, are a mere $10 by Eventbrite in advance or $20 at the door. So leave us with one last idea, and then we will complete this conversation today. Thank you so much. What would you like to tell us?
I'd like to say I really respect the Occupy Wall Street effort. I've spoken to them. I've given monetary seminars to the Occupy Chicago, the Occupy Albany, visited the Occupy in Washington, D.C. Would love to do it in New York later on, but come on into this meeting. You won't be disappointed. And there's one last thing. We do insist that in our activities that we have a good time. And that'll be...
Heaven forbid. I think that's going to happen. I can tell that already. Well, for those of the listeners who would like to know more about this man and the work that his institute is doing, you can write Stephen Zarlenga directly at AMI, that's American Monetary Institute, at Taconic, TACONIC.net, or visit their website at www.monetary.org. I suggest that you Google him as well and read the excellent material found about him and his institute there. And don't forget Wikipedia. Follow Jerry Ashton as well, that's me, at Written Off USA on Twitter and at the Huffington Post. Signing off for 15 Minutes of Fact. Thank you again for listening.